Summary of Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. In the first chapter of Northanger Abbey, we are introduced to the story's main character, Catherine Morland. She is a 17-year-old ordinary yet good-hearted girl. She grew up in the country as the oldest daughter of a parson and 10 other children. Catherine isn't very pretty as a child, but she gets more beautiful as she ages. She also starts to worry about what she wears and read books all the time. Catherine is thrilled that Mr. and Mrs. Allen, a wealthy couple from her neighborhood who don't have any kids, want to take her on her first trip away from home. Catherine is let down when she gets to Bath, a holiday town, and finds that Mrs. Allen doesn't know anyone because she only cares about clothes. Kate meets Henry Tilney, a young guy who is 24 years old. He's cute to her, and she hopes to see him again soon. Soon after, Catherine and Mrs. Allen meet an old student named Mrs. Thorpe in the pump room, which is a key meeting spot in Bath. Mrs. Allen and Mrs. Thorpe's daughter Isabella quickly become friends with Catherine. Kate's older brother James goes to school with Mrs. Thorpe's son John, so the Thorpes already know him. Catherine and Isabella can't stay away from each other, but Catherine keeps looking for Henry Tilney, who seems to have left Bath. Catherine and Isabella are shocked when they see their brothers in the street one day. Catherine doesn't know that James and Isabella are interested in each other. Catherine meets Isabella's brother John, who is rude and only talks about horses. He asks Catherine to dance with him at a ball that night, though. Catherine doesn't trust her own judgment enough to tell John she doesn't like him, even though she thinks he is rude. John goes to the ball and leaves Catherine to talk to a friend about horses. James and Isabella also leave Catherine to dance with each other. Catherine thinks she doesn't look like she could find a partner. Henry shows up out of the blue and asks her to dance. She says no to his offer, which makes her sad, because she already has plans to dance with John. When John comes back, they dance, but Catherine keeps looking back at Henry. Kate meets Henry's sister, Miss Eleanor Tilney, at the dance. She is upset when she sees Henry lead another woman to the dance floor because she hopes Henry will ask her to dance again. John asks her to dance again, but she says no. Kate plans to meet Eleanor the next day and get to know her better. John, Isabella, and James instead talk her into going for a drive with them. When Catherine goes with John, John scares her by saying that her brother's carriage is dangerous. When Catherine gets scared, John takes this back. Catherine doesn't understand why John keeps contradicting himself. When Catherine gets back from the drive, she is upset to hear that Mrs. Allen met the Tilneys while she was gone. The Thorpes keep getting in the way of Catherine's plans to get closer to the Tilneys. Henry asks Catherine to dance at another ball, but John cuts him off and says Catherine promised to dance with him. She still dances with Henry, and they have a great time. Kate plans to go for a walk with the Tilneys the next day, but she doesn't know if they'll show up if it rains. John gets Catherine to go on another carriage ride by telling her that he saw the Tilneys leave town in their car. Kate sees the Tilneys walking through town from the carriage. After seeing the Tilneys, John seems to have lied, and she is mad at him. But he won't stop the carriage so she can get out. Catherine tells Henry Tilney she's sorry she missed their walk that night at the theater. Her father, General Tilney, is talking to John Thorpe and looking at her as well. Catherine moves her walk with the Tilneys to the next day, but the Thorpes and James beg her to change her plans and go on another drive instead. Catherine says no, but John changes the time of her walk with the Tilneys without asking her first. Catherine goes back to the Tilneys to fix what John did. Eleanor Tilney asks Catherine to join them for dinner the next night after a nice walk. Isabella tells Catherine the next day that she and James are engaged, but she is afraid that the Morlands will not like her as a daughter-in-law. Catherine didn't think they were dating, so she is shocked and happy. John follows Catherine as she leaves the Thorpes' home. He talks about getting married in vague terms, but she doesn't pay much attention and doesn't get it. Charles and Catherine dance at the next ball, while Isabella dances with Henry's older brother, Captain Frederick Tilney, who just got to town. Isabella told Catherine she wasn't going to dance. Catherine is surprised when Henry Tilney tells her that she doesn't understand why other people do the things they do because she only thinks about how she would act in any situation and is nicer than most people. Isabella finds out the next day how much the Morlands will give her and James. Isabella seems upset about how much money he gave her and says that Mr. Morland has not been kind. Catherine is upset, but Isabella says she's just sad that she and James have to wait a few years to get married. When Catherine gets an offer to visit the Tilneys at Northanger Abbey, she is thrilled. She will live in an old building just like the ones in the books she loves. In the pump room the next day, Isabella tells Catherine she should marry John. When Catherine hears that John wants to marry her, she is shocked. She tells Isabella that she is interested in Henry instead of John. Then Captain Tilney walks in and sits down next to Isabella. When Catherine hears them chatting, she gets jealous for James. Catherine watches this flirtation with rising worry in the days before she leaves for Northanger. She asks Henry to tell his brother to leave Bath, but Henry says that Isabella's loyalty to James should not need any outside help. Soon after, Catherine and the Tilneys leave Bath. Kate tells Henry how excited she is to visit a real church like the ones she has read about on the way there. In an old building like Northanger, Henry tells her a story about the strange and scary things that are likely to happen to her. Catherine is mesmerized, even though she knows Henry is making fun of her. Catherine wants to find out what's going on at Northanger. After checking her room and finding nothing strange, Catherine comes up with the idea that the general is bad and killed his wife. Henry finds her in Mrs. Tilney's room when she sneaks in by herself. Henry tells her that she needs to be more careful in the future after hearing about her fears. She feels ashamed and sure that he will never love her again, but he treats her better after this. Catherine gets a letter from James telling her that they are no longer going to be engaged to Isabella. He tells Catherine to leave Northanger before Captain Tilney shows up to tell her that he is going to marry Isabella. Catherine tells Henry and Eleanor about her brother's letter, which makes her sad. But they tell her that their father won't let them marry Isabella because she doesn't have any money. She doesn't understand why General Tilney said he doesn't care about money, which she heard. Soon after, the general makes it sound like he wants Catherine and Henry to get married. Henry should feel the same way as Catherine. Isabella writes to Catherine to ask for help clearing up a problem she has with James, but Catherine now sees through Isabella's lies and decides to forget about her old friend. Soon after, the general goes to London for a few days, and Henry also leaves Northanger. One night, the general comes back out of the blue. He sends a sad Eleanor to tell Catherine that she will be kicked out of the house the next morning without a proper farewell. She tries to keep this from Eleanor because she is shocked. Catherine is sad when she gets home, but she is welcomed with joy. Even though her family doesn't like how she was treated, they tell her to forget about it. No one knows that Catherine is in love while she mopes around the house. After 3 days, Henry shows up at Fullerton out of the blue and asks Catherine to marry him. He says that John lied to the general in Bath by making him think that Catherine was very wealthy, and then John lied again in London by saying that Catherine was very poor. When the general thought Catherine was an heiress, he wanted her to marry Henry. When he found out she wasn't, he quickly sent her back to Northanger to be sent away. To his father's surprise, Henry won't do what he's told and forget about her. In order for Catherine and Henry to get married, the Morlands demand that the general agree to the marriage as well. She eventually gets married to a wealthy viscount, and the general finds out that Catherine is not as poor as he thought. He then agrees to the marriage, and Catherine and Henry are married.
About the author. Jane Austen was born in the village of Steventon in Hampshire, England, from a family that struggled financially but had a strong intellectual background. Jane was the 7th of 8 children. Her only sister was Cassandra, who was 3 years older than her. In addition to working as a priest, Austen's father worked the land around his house and taught young boys who lived in the rectory. Austen's family home was a happy place. There were often plays in the barn, and aunts and cousins came to visit often. Rich family members wrote and visited a lot, bringing news and fashion from Paris and London to the country vicarage. Austen started writing when she was a teenager and read her family her stories out loud. Austen never got married, but a wealthy but ugly guy did ask her to marry him one time. She said yes to the marriage, but the next morning she called it off. In the late 1790s, Austen went to Bath more than once. In 1801, she moved there with her parents. She wrote Northanger Abbey during this time. For a few years after her father died, she and her mother lived in different places because they didn't have much money. Austen worked on her books all through the first 10 years of the 1800s. Two of her writings, including Northanger Abbey, were published after she died at the age of 41.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.